Eva, Estrella, which is a deer.
Yeah.
Margaret, and that's it.
George.
Sooty.
Well, I'm going to call her Catherine Fitzgerald. I'm going to call because she's not a knight because she can't be a knight.
Yes. Knightess.
And that has not been allowed yet. So I'm going to call her the Nitress. The Nitress of Glin. Catherine Fitzgerald and Dominic West. We've got to thank them for saving Glin Castle and keeping it in their family, which has not been easy for them. And everybody at Glin Castle for all their efforts here, and what a fantastic place it is. Well, here we are in the Emerald Isle, my favourite country and favourite place. Thank you all for being here. So, 20 years ago, we got married down the road in Rathkeel and stayed here on the first night of our honeymoon. This is a very special place for us, so I'm told. You'll have to ask Catherine about the wedding because I was pissed most of the time and particularly badly hungover during the wedding day, which I've been reminded about by Catherine on many occasions. So I'd just like to go through the men here, sorry about girls, but just the men here, just a few words and my quick summary on them as I see them. Nervous? Peter Plaskett.
I'm guilty. Hang him. Send him down.
Blackie.
Blackie?
Blackie, nickname Blackie.
Blackie.
Right, okay. His greatest gift is he sees everything in a positive light.
Yes, he
Doesn't he?
Oh yeah, it's good, Peter.
He is definitely generous to a fault. Young kid, unfortunately unemployable. So he started his own property design company and never looked back. The gifted boy who made everybody else in the art room look like monkeys. Now only works for multi-billionaires, and villains. Right, John Wright. Where's John Wright? There's John Wright. John Wright, memory boy. Eh? Right. Loves talking about the old days when we were young and gay. Old school mate with great skill on the piano. Maybe he'll play for us later.
God.
Former civil servant.
No.
But he couldn't help it, and never really got over the loss of his Francis Barnes. Richard Haskell.
Oh dear.
Richard Haskell. Tricky Dicky.
Oh my goodness.
Former racing driver. Well, he should have been. We had never understood why he was such a fast driver until he told me recently he was a relative of world champion Jim Clark. That reminds me that years and years ago, really, Richard and Joe were driving to Abersoch, North Wales, on the pre-motorway route and before speed cameras, and as he would say, going for it, Joe turned to him and said, if we go any faster, Rich, we're never going to get there. Stuart Prest. Presty. Out enjoying himself most of the time. A potato king, but reluctant farmer. But it does keep him in the luxury of which he's become accustomed. Oh, poor farmers. David Barlow. DB. Where's David Barlow? DB, the tall, good-looking, suave lady killer.
Is that right, John?
Yeah.
Good looking.
Right. Gamekeeper turned poacher. Former city planning officer, now a ruthless but charming property developer. He's coming to a field near you soon. Mick Singleton. Millimetre Mick. Should really be on the high seas finding new lands, but spends every waking hour working his nuts off to keep Fiona in dresses and armours. Everything has to be right, and nothing is too much trouble. If you want something doing, ask Mick. John Box. John Box, property tycoon. Oh, sorry, boxing. Property tycoon, and in the Castleford Mafia for many years. Now gone all soft, but not in the head or bed. So Julie says.
Can you repeat that?
He's not here, but I'll do him anyway. Stephen Rookie. The other Potato King. The only thing he loves more than potatoes is Joe. At his recent wedding, he accidentally called Joe Spuds in the ceremony, but that's all forgotten now, and I don't think you heard it. Clive Richardson. Easily the fittest person here. Rides his bike 24 miles a day, but may fall asleep during a conversation or at any moment.
It's called narcolepsy.
It's not just me. That's alright.
David Walsh.
Yeah.
Ralph. Well, we won't go. Businessman, even though we have no idea what he does, and I think nor does he. But he is a philosopher and a historian who gets better the longer you know him, and this is his island. My island. Braveheart. My island.
Yeah,
So thank you for having us.
He's the only one who didn't drink Guinness today at the pub.
Al Buchan.
Where's Al?
Big Al. Big Al.
I'm sitting down on the
You're not on the cocaine again when you powder your nose.
Al Buchan, Big Al, married to a doctor, so he always keeps up his 5-a-day freak portions in the form of fermented apples. Very bright, the Scottish Cockney Bamba Gascoigne. But watch out, he tells very, very long stories. Mark Harrison, Harry. Keen on everything. Loves Land Rovers and Jaguars, but tractors and lever best. He's always in a good mood, and he has the best sounding laugh of anybody. Dr. Nicholas Wilson. Dr. Nick. Rydale's biggest drug dealer. Quite bonkers with huge IQ. A doctor, but should really have been a scientist working on nuclear fusion, alien life forms, the fifth dimension, something. Yeah, that's it. Alfred Spooner.
Big Al.
My best boy. Everybody is his friend. Drives me insane some of the time, but watch him. he might go far. Finn Clive. Finn, the reluctant aristocrat. Always cheerful. And I have a feeling he will one day make us all look very working class. Anyway, it seems it's my 60th birthday, and that's not good really, but then again, it could be worse. I could be dead.
As your doctor, you are.
Technically, so with your drug. Anyway, I suppose we have to crack on while we're fit. As Diesel Jack once told me in a pub. Crack on while you're fit. Anyway, me now. Me, born 1959 in Kingston upon Thames, to John Spooner and Margaret Cassin, two complete opposites. One a sort of communist, the other a half-Irish actress that never was, with a fiery temper. He a person of communist values and big Labour Party supporter, miser, and never threw anything away. Indeed, my mother used to ask why he pulled the chain. He had big ambitions to be an MP in the Labour Party and was doing quite well, with my mother writing all his speeches. However, she found out he'd been giving a rather attractive woman a lift as he went to work, so the speech writing stopped immediately, and that was the end of any ambition of being an MP. He carried on as a member of the Labour Party for his entire life, and I think was a member of 72 different good work societies. Never once in his life did he get drunk or smoke a cigarette. His vice was pork pies and orange juice. My mother, on the other hand, was half Irish and had a fierce temper. She could recite poetry and long stories at will, and when annoyed could come up with whole new swear words. For example, when caravanning, which she hated, told my father, who was taking a long time to do something, said to him, "For Christ's bloody ball's sake, man, get a move on." I would be maybe 10 at that time, but I did know always her love of me was endless. I actually had a great childhood and lived in a huge house, Brinkworth Hall, Elvington. We had the run of Elvington Airfield to mess about in old cars and motorbikes. And even though my father and I didn't see eye to eye on most things, and he thought I was a bit of a waster, on his death and going through his literal mountain of paperwork he had amassed in life, I came across a letter he had written to the main commander at Catterick Garrison, which controlled Elvington Airfield. He had asked that me and my friends be allowed to mess about on the airfield, as we were doing no harm. As many times we were kicked off by the military police. Mysteriously, this had stopped, and we never knew why. It's a bit, oh my goodness, here we are. Dad's can sort things. I could still cry. The main and brave thing I suppose my parents did was taking my sister and I to Kenya in 1965 for 3 years, which had a huge impact on our lives. We lived and travelled all over East Africa, as father being a teacher had plenty of holiday time off. I am grateful to have had this time and now realise that it was for us that he did it. Moving on, I didn't do well at school, full of comprehensive, but was always fairly practical and started steel fabrications at 18. In fact, at 27 I thought I was going places with a factory in Leeds with 36 hairy-arsed, fantastic welders. But unfortunately it all went pear-shaped and I never realised the dream of being an industrialist. Anyway,
you were close.
Years
there, mate.
Years later, I got into selling vintage luggage for some reason, and got a shop in York. And above that was a flat with an attractive bird and her boyfriend. I kept an eye on this bird, and thought sometimes it looked like they weren't getting on that well. So after my best chat-up line, what was that? Bit chat. Catherine and I had a date at the Bluebell pub in Fosgate. We got together. We got married here in Ireland. I got over the fact that she was not a millionaire, but in fact a millionaire. I heard people saying that she was a millionaire. For God's sake, how was I supposed to know it meant hat maker? So, Catherine Cobb, brought up really by nuns at St Hilda's Convent in Whitby. With Leah.
Yeah.
Boarding from 7 years old.
Yeah.
This sounds to me very sad, and I don't think it even made her religious. It certainly didn't make her good with the Hoover. But it did make her independent, and no one could touch her for her strength of character. Always positive in bad times, and seems to deal with me, even though I am a grumpy old bastard.
I would say kick, not bastard. They've all been through heritage.
I think God must still be with her from her convent days, and maybe the nuns helped her make her the beautiful person that she is. So we're in Limerick, and I could have really done with my mother alive to give me a bit of a hand with this, but this is my best bit, right? Okay? We are Limerick. There was a young lady called Cobb who was never really a snob. It all went well in the bar. She took it a little too far and ended her days with a knob.
Good effort.
Anyhow, later on I gave birth to Alfred and Beatrice. Very painful, but it's been worth it because they've turned out quite well. Me, a few years ago, was having school classes, quite a few years ago, isn't it, on the LGBT community at Rydell School. And while we were driving along, I inquired how it was going. No answer. B, how's it going with those LGBT lessons? No answer. B, how's it going? Anyway, eventually she turned to me and said, well, there's no point in talking to you about it, is there?
Good answer.
She is a smart lady. The world is a far less confusing place for B than me. When Alfie was born, my father was on his deathbed in hospital and couldn't really speak. We took Alfie to show him and tell him we'd named him after his father and him, Alfred John, and asked him what he thought. He looked.
Was he disappointed?
I leant over his bed and he whispered in my ear, "Who's the father?"
That is absolutely true.
So here we are now running a pub, and it's been rather good. The grapes in, and what a great thing it is. But that wouldn't be possible without you lot, and we are honoured to be your friends. I'd like to take this opportunity to tell Catherine I love you. To Beatrice, I love you. Alfred, I love you. And you lot. Thank you. Thank you for being my friend. It may be the time when we have to look back and understand where we came from and how we got here. I've made plenty of mistakes, but in the end, it turned out okay. And I'd like to finish. I'd like to salute absent friends. My mother, my father, my sister, it's not here, Catherine, B, Alfie, and all of you. I salute you all.
Yay.